you, everyone. Welcome back to the series of Dhamma Talks on World Buddhist TV, organized by Buddhist Sangha Youth of Thailand. So today is a great pleasure, to have the Venerable Jim with us again, to share his idea, his worldview, especially his vision about how we can propagate or disseminate the Dharma or Buddha Dharma to the modern world, especially from his long journey according to the Buddhist idea or even his Western idea, how he can help us with the Buddha Dharma dissemination through technology, especially in globalization era. We cannot reject, we cannot deny this kind of the device, to spread the Buddha Dharma. One thing I would like to, set the notation that, in modern time, most of the celebrities, whether it be the star, movie star, the singer, or the politician, they are afraid of the media. They are afraid of the technology. Maybe they can do wrong, but if that wrongdoing is a secret, no problem. But if it's spread through media, that's a big problem for them, to deal with. So that's we have to share with Jim Marshall about how we can, advertise Buddha Dharma, not just only advertise the commercial, stuff or products, whatever. So that's, I think, is a very nice topic with us. So welcome, Jim.
Oh, Sawadee-ka. Glad to see you
Glad
again.
to see you.
This is such a
Welcome.
wonderful time.
So today, Jim, we would like to share and discuss about the technology, especially how we can use internet, how to create blog or even the media, especially publication, to write the article through. I think it's most of the Westerner, especially young one. They play in the internet and then they can access to the data. One of my students, not a kind of student, but is a Norwegian boy, about the 18 years old, Jim. He came to Thailand. I asked him, why did you come to Thailand? He said, I came to Thailand to learn more about Buddhism. And then I questioned him, how you learn Buddhism from? He said, through internet, through YouTube. Very, well-known, web page. So that's why a big surprise for me. At that time, I tried to learn the media by myself to create some web blog or whatever, and then even this TV program to help the people accessible to the Buddha Dharma. So what do you think about this, Jim?
Well, certainly that has to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things that are contributing to that I think should be appreciated and recognized.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the internet has surprised everyone.
Surprise.
When I was younger,
Yeah.
it wasn't possible.
At that time, you had internet?
Oh, no, absolutely no. When I graduated from college in 1970.
1970.
And that was almost 12 years before the internet actually started making a difference. It was, in fact, invented in Geneva, actually.
Geneva.
It was a Geneva invention, and it was free. And the fellow that put it together did it with the idea to share information. It turned out to be, of course, an astounding, actually an unimaginable tool for what I'm going to call a world village. I think it's a good term for us to appreciate and to, let us say, acknowledge some of the characteristics of that new tool that is available to us that has not been available to anyone before.
Right.
It turns out that technology is Western. This wouldn't have been invented in East. They had certainly all the possibilities of doing this, but they didn't do it.
Yeah.
In fact, technology is probably not something that would normally be figured out even in very intelligent communities. It's an odd and unique discovery
Right.
that in fact is not and would not be considered typical.
Yeah.
If people would say, well, we have technology, therefore it must be obvious. No, we have technology mostly because it was a mistake and grew on its own.
Right.
And it's a big surprise if you think about how many possible places it didn't happen, which is most every place it didn't happen. It only really happened in one place.
Right.
And that actually happened in Northern Europe because of the Protestant Reformation against the Catholics. If that didn't happen, we simply would not have technology because it never actually started any other place in the planet. Well, given that, we have to also appreciate the fact that tradition, Buddhist traditions, and there are many, hundreds, maybe even thousands of different schools and sects and applications of the Buddha Dharma, which as far as I'm concerned is very important.
Right.
I know there's a movement to try and formalize Theravadan tradition and to make all Buddhist teachings uniform. My feeling is that probably one isn't going to work and probably isn't a very good idea either. Simply because there's so many different ways people have or need in order to discover Buddha Dharma as a value. And to think that it only has one value for one kind of person is impolite. Given that, I think tradition is one of the biggest problems that Buddhism does have. Because they say, well, we've been doing this for 1,000 years, it must be right. And the answer is, you've been doing it for 1,000 years, and it may or may not be right.
Yeah.
You have to say, is it right now, and is it valuable now? And that may or may not be true.
Yeah, right.
And so I think that it's important that a new vehicle, this new vehicle is being discovered and should be utilized. For these reasons, one, there's no prejudice against it, which is a huge problem for traditions, because when you're in a tradition, somebody doesn't like you.
Yep.
In fact, only a few people actually do like you, and everybody else criticizes you. Internet doesn't have that as an issue. Plus, the language on the internet is basically English.
Yeah.
Now, because it's English, it's just English. Why it's English, it's who knows why. It turns out the English were excellent administrators for the last 300 years.
Right.
And they were effective and reasonable, actually reasonably good people that were actually fairly helpful, not through Asia, but through most of the world, as far as being actually good administrators. They were excellent administrators. The French, the Spanish, and the Portuguese were not. They were abusive and impolite. The British, however much people criticized them, were actually more polite than the previous folks. And so that consideration actually made a difference. It turns out that now that science, since the turn of the century, is mostly being done in English. All the papers, the reasonable scientific papers and discoveries, are all in English.
Yep.
They used to be in French before, then in German, but now everything is in English.
Yep. Everything.
And so English is the rural village language. Turns out that nobody can have a prejudice against English, because if you do, you don't have anyone to talk to.
Yeah. But maybe next year the Chinese.
No, Chinese will never catch on as an international language.
I know that.
And it's a point that just because more people speak it, it must be right. No, all it means that more people speak it. That there's so many prejudice against the Chinese as a culture. It's not that they're a bad culture, it's just that they're very prejudiced.
Yep.
And I know there's a reputation of, let's say, Americans being prejudiced against black people. Well, certainly I grew up there and spent several years in the South and other places. And the prejudice in the United States is nothing compared to the intercultural and even social prejudice in Asia. There's just no comparison. Asia was way ahead on their prejudicial values and opinions. So Asian languages are not going to become international languages. And it turns out that English, people just get used to it, and it's a versatile enough language that people will just have to get used to that. Also because science is written in that language. In order to understand the technology and the values, you're going to have to understand English.
Yep.
So the conditions are that the internet no one has prejudice against.
Right.
It's in English, which nobody really has any prejudice against. It's just English. Science is written in English. It also transcends tradition, which is essential for the understanding and appreciation of the Buddhist teaching, insofar as it does translate just fine into English. Unfortunately, and as far as I'm concerned, up until just maybe 20 years ago, the translation efforts have been clumsy at best. There have been genuinely concerned and honorable efforts, but they really haven't had the background, the experience, and the talent, and the talented people that are now available to do the translations and have enough experiences with not only just Buddhist tradition, but English as a language.
Yeah.
Such they can find better terms in English that are not direct transcriptions or translations of specific Pali words that are almost universally incomprehensible in English.
Exactly.
And so the object here is to take Western people and have them have enough personal experiences within the Buddhist traditions, such that they can actually translate their experiences into a English vernacular that is more comprehensible to the English mind. And I'm of the opinion that Buddha Dharma translates just fine, but Buddhist traditions do not.
Exactly. I totally agree with you.
It doesn't mean that traditions are either bad or good. It merely they are merely untranscribable or translatable.
Right.
It's something that happens in a specific place for specific reasons.
Right.
That and when you go to another place, those values and reasons are no longer relevant.
Right.
For example, the idea of a mandala. 35 years ago, when we translated a mandala, the north and south were north and south, where you expect to find them. But the east and west were switched. Where we would expect to see west, W, there was an east. And that was a direct translation. Well, it took us 5 years to figure out that Westerners, when they looked at a mandala, they looked down from above. Well, the Tibetans, they looked from underneath. The mandala was above them. So what happens is when you change from here to here, the east and west changes.
I see.
Now, it was an accurate translation.
That's a different space, right?
Well, it was an accurate translation, but completely missed the idea. It didn't, the words were translated properly, the idea was completely lost. And that happens numerous times, especially the idea of karma. For example, if you look at the definitions of people and how they explain karma, it's exactly the same words they explain as what's called the will of God. The will of God and karma have exactly the same explanations. They're not the same at all. The explanations are exactly the same. And so when Western people come and say, I really don't understand what you mean by karma, means that it's not possible to understand what you mean by karma because the translations are not correct.
Right.
The words are correct, but the idea is completely wrong.
Right.
And it's another example of academic fussiness. And that misses the point completely. Misses the idea that was originally captured in the initial language, but in order to understand the meanings, you would have to understand the culture and the living conditions and the reasons why the words were used. None of that gets included in a translation.
Right.
So our current technology now gives us an opportunity to actually translate it in a more rational or comprehensible way for the world village to be able to, let us say, include that in their ethics, values, and decision-making protocols. I think there's enough understanding about the Buddha Dharma to understand that it is, what is the truth? It's an analytical process.
Right.
It's what makes sense to you. If it doesn't make sense, what difference does the information make? It's irrelevant. So the object is to use the medium in such a way to make it comprehensible to the world village in terms that they understand. They have access through YouTube. Now, is everything on YouTube wonderful to see and know? No. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that the medium itself cannot be used as a tool to transmit actually reasonable information.
Right.
But then again, it has to be done conscientiously. And my argument for the last 40 years is just because it's academic doesn't necessarily mean it's helpful. And certainly when I translated the Bhava Chakra into the Tambolian map, I took it to an academic monk. And his criticism was, it's not academic. And I go, what? I know. He says, but it does it make sense? He said, oh yeah, it makes sense, but it's not academic.
Yeah.
And I go, well, does it have to be academic to make sense? Well, basically it doesn't.
Yeah.
Academic only means it's academic.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything else. And that's what the Buddha said to his, when he debated, and we talked about debate, and internet and chat rooms and blogs are a way of debating. And I hope, if I can make a contribution, is saying, yes, you have to debate. You have to be able to debate. You have to be able to argue convincingly what you know.
Yeah.
And certainly in the Theravada tradition, there just isn't any debate. It's lecture. You sit there and listen and don't say anything for 25 years.
Yeah.
And then what do you know? You haven't practiced anything that you've been told.
Yep.
I think that is not necessarily very helpful.
Yeah.
I think from the very beginning, you should have to argue what you've learned and practice those arguments in a critical environment. Not an environment that agrees with everything you have to say, but an argument that will question anything that you say.
Yeah.
This is extraordinarily vitalizing and something that not only the Buddha had to do, but the early Buddhists had to do.
Yeah.
Now, I read recently that someone said Buddhism, it was in Karta, that Buddhism was the first proselytizing religion. Well, I think he got it wrong. In fact, proselytizing didn't really begin until maybe 100 years ago, or maybe 150 years ago, and not
Colonize.
really. Well, when they colonized things, that wasn't proselytizing. That was overwhelming a culture and forcing that information onto them. That's not proselytizing. Proselytizing is essentially trying to convince someone else to believe something else, not saying, well, change your mind or die.
Yeah.
That's not proselytizing. Buddha didn't proselytize. Buddha debated. And there's a difference between debate and proselytizing.
Right.
And the biographer in Karta got it wrong because he didn't understand what the tradition was like 2,500 years ago. Anyway, I think we should reestablish debate as a value within the Buddha Dharma in the technological environment that we are presented with.
Yep. So, do you have any plan, to build the stage for the debate, the Buddha Dharma? I think it's how we can create some, we call a Dhamma blog, for everyone who take interest in in the Dhamma, Buddha Dhamma, or even spiritual matter, they can come and chat. I think it's not just only Blogspot, not just only for the WordPress or whatever about the blog service online, but we should have the Dhamma.
Well, I think we use the map as a process for debate and argument. By simply posing an issue, like what are you doing here, and having that as a debate topic, and having that within either a chat room or a bulletin board, such that people can contribute to that question and get feedback on their answer.
Right.
Because feedback is the most difficult to get, and it's the only you can only get it in debate, or essentially a structured argument.
Yeah.
Now, an argument isn't necessarily antagonistic. An argument is people presenting their information and discussing it in a rational way.
Yeah.
And the Tambolian map is a very good example of early Buddhist dialogue, insofar as presenting an issue and discussing it within the local environment to see exactly how people understand that. And that's how feedback is essentially what you get in an internet process. And that is the virtue of the technology.
So, do you have anything to say to the audience in the end of program for how we, make contribution to, spreading Buddha Dhamma through technology?
Well, certainly supporting you and the things that you do would be an extraordinary help. You are, I think, a very rare opportunity here for Thai Buddhism to be introduced to a world village market and the West, and that you are essentially a leader in that regard. So I think you as a spokesperson for this idea, and you have this distinction by default and the fact that you're doing it anyway, that supporting you and what you do is, I think, the most helpful that people can be. And I think support in financial support would probably be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Sure, thank you. สำหรับที่ได้สนทนากับสามเณรจิมหรือว่าอาจารย์จิมไปนะเป็นเรื่องเกี่ยวกับการเผยแผ่พุทธธรรมโดยอาศัยเทคโนโลยีในยุคสมัยปัจจุบันโดยชาวตะวันตกนะมาให้ความคิดเห็นท่านก็ได้คุยในเรื่องของก่อนอื่นได้คุยในเรื่องของการเผยแผ่นะต้องอาศัยในเรื่องของภาษานะฮะโดยเฉพาะในเรื่องของปัจจุบันเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะโดยเฉพาะภาษาอังกฤษมีอิทธิพลในทุกวงการทั่วโลกไม่ว่าจะเป็นวงการวิทยาศาสตร์วงการเทคโนโลยีวงการทุกอย่างก็เขียนเป็นภาษาอังกฤษแม้กระทั่งอินเทอร์เน็ตที่เรากำลังใช้ในยุคสมัยปัจจุบันติดต่อสื่อสารกันนี้ก็ถือว่าเป็นการริเริ่มและมีการเขียนโดยการใช้เป็นภาษาอังกฤษซะส่วนมากแม้อาจจะมีเป็นภาษาอื่นบ้างก็แต่ว่ายังไม่เป็นสากลยังไม่เป็นนานาชาติเท่าไหร่ดังนั้นภาษาอังกฤษถือว่าเป็นสื่อในการที่จะได้เข้าใจในเรื่องของการติดต่อสื่อสารกันมากยิ่งขึ้นก็ถือว่าเป็นโอกาสดีที่เราจะได้นำหลักพุทธธรรมไปเผยแผ่ผ่านสื่อต่างๆโดยเฉพาะภาษาอังกฤษแต่อาจารย์สามเณรจิมเนี่ยก็แนะนำว่าในฐานะที่เป็นชาวตะวันตกในบางอย่างบางครั้งเราแปลภาษาจากภาษาหนึ่งไปเป็นภาษาหนึ่งก็ต้องขึ้นอยู่กับปริบทเงื่อนไขในการใช้ชีวิตการอยู่ในที่ตรงนั้นๆด้วยไม่ใช่ว่าแปลบางทีแปลถูกศัพท์ถูกวิชาการแต่ว่าเนื้อหาใจความไม่ได้หรือแปลโดยพยัญชนะถูกพยัญชนะแต่ว่าโดยอัดโดยรสโดยความเข้าใจความหมายจริงๆนะยังไม่ได้ยังไม่ถูกต้องเสียทีเดียวดังนั้นต้องควรระวังเป็นสำคัญในเรื่องของการแปลการสื่อสารหลักธรรมตรงนี้เช่นกันท่านก็ได้แนะนำในเรื่องของการเผยแผ่ในเรื่องของการผ่านเทคโนโลยีสมัยใหม่ให้แก่ชาวตะวันตกก็ถือว่าเป็นสิ่งที่ดีโดยเฉพาะ ทางกลุ่มของเราก็ได้มีโอกาสนะท่านก็บอกได้ริเริ่มในการที่จะนำเทคโนโลยีมาในการเผยแผ่พุทธธรรมแล้วก็จะได้ติดต่อสื่อสารกับญาติโยมยิ่งขึ้นไป เราก็ถือว่าเป็นโอกาสดี และญาติโยมก็จะได้ศึกษาหลักธรรมมากยิ่งขึ้นผ่านอินเทอร์เน็ตอย่างที่เราได้ทำธรรมะออนไลน์ ได้ทำมัลติมีเดียออนไลน์ หรือแม้กระทั่งได้รวบรวมจัดองค์ความรู้เกี่ยวกับคำสอนทางพุทธศาสนาญาติโยมท่านใดที่สนใจก็สามารถเข้าไปดูได้ อันนี้ก็เป็นการได้สนทนากับอาจารย์จิมเป็นเบื้องต้นในเรื่องของการสนทนาธรรมในการที่จะนำเทคโนโลยีไปเป็นสื่อในการสอนพุทธธรรมก็ถือว่าเป็นโอกาสที่ดี ประการในช่วงสุดท้ายเช่นเคยนะอาตมาก็แนะนำหนังสือนะเพื่อที่ญาติโยมบางคนบางท่านอาจจะได้ดูสัปดาห์หนึ่งแต่ว่าอีกสัปดาห์หนึ่งยังไม่ได้ดูหรือว่าเพิ่งมาดูในสัปดาห์นี้ก็ถือว่าทางศูนย์ของเราก็มีหนังสือมาแนะนำในเรื่องของการสอนโลกนะอันนี้เป็นภาษาไทยเจริญพรญาติโยมหลักวิธีสอนโลกให้เก่งโยมจะเห็นนะหลักวิธีสอนโลกให้เก่งก็จะเป็นในเรื่องของการนำหลักพุทธธรรมมาบูรณาการกับสังคมสมัยใหม่เป็นภาษาสมัยใหม่ภาษาไม่ใช่วิชาการนะโยมเป็นภาษาอ่านง่ายๆภาษาธรรมดาภาษาชาวบ้านก็สามารถให้จะเข้าใจหลักธรรมได้ดียิ่งขึ้นไปอันนี้ก็คือเป็นภาษาไทยส่วนในเรื่องของภาษาอังกฤษอีกครั้งหนึ่งนะครับญาติโยมก็สามารถที่จะรับชมนะฮะในเรื่องของ Buddhist Humor ซึ่งอาจารย์ที่เขียนก็คือที่มากับอาตมาได้คุยกันในวันนี้ก็คืออาจารย์จิมก็คือ Buddhist Humor ท่านก็กำลังรวบรวมมีเวอร์ชั่นตามมาอีกหลากหลายนะฮะก็เพื่อที่จะช่วยกันเผยแผ่พุทธธรรมผ่านสื่อสิ่งพิมพ์หลังจากที่เราทำผ่านสื่อมัลติมีเดียทั้งหลายแล้วก็จะมีการผ่านสื่อสิ่งพิมพ์นี้เป็นอีกนะก็wonderful Jim for your show and talk so thank you very much for your participation and contribution to Buddha Dhamma dissemination especially through multimedia like a TV show so I hope you will progress in the Buddha Dhamma and enjoy your monastic life and work for the people of the world, not just only for our own people, but whoever, even the sentient beings. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you for your watching, and I hope you enjoy the show. If you have any question, any doubts, or even comments, please feel free to share with us for the betterment of our program. So I hope this Dhamma series or Dhamma talk will go on and improve the program through your comments. So I am Pramha Sompong Santacito from Wat Arun as moderator. I would like to end the program. See you next time, same place. Until then. โอเคครับขอบคุณ